Have you ever found yourself just standing in a coffee shop in a foreign country and you're just staring blankly at the barista?
Oh, absolutely. The classic freeze response.
Right. You suddenly realize that those thousands of flashcards you meticulously memorized are just, well, completely useless to you right in this exact moment.
It is a universally humbling experience, honestly.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, you know the word for coffee. You know the verb for to want. But somehow, like, connecting those pieces in real time feels like trying to defuse a bomb.
Yeah, because you have all this raw data floating around in your head, but you have zero infrastructure to actually deploy it when the pressure is on.
Exactly.
It's the difference between knowing the theory of swimming and actually just being thrown into the deep end of the pool.
Which is exactly why we are tackling this today. Welcome to the deep dive. We are exploring a remarkably dense and actionable guide today.
Right. Navigating the language learning journey.
Yes, that's the one. And the mission here is to map out the entire expedition. You know, from that first burst of absolute beginner enthusiasm all the way to intuitive, effortless fluency.
And it's a long journey.
It is. But here is the twist. The source text uses this really fascinating linguistic framing to describe the journey. It uses phrasal verbs.
Which is such a brilliant pedagogical choice by the authors.
I mean, it really is.
Because phrasal verbs, these dynamic, multi-word action phrases, they are literally verbs of motion. They represent the essential microactions required for mastery.
Right. They aren't static.
Exactly. They demand a physical or psychological shift from you.
So we are going to lean into that today. We'll intentionally highlight these action phrases as we move through the roadmap, not by reading you a dictionary definition, obviously.
Well, you already know what these words mean.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we're looking at the specific actions they demand of you. Okay, so let's unpack this. Every journey starts with that initial intoxicating dopamine hit, right?
The honeymoon phase.
Yes. Think about when you finally decide to take up a new language. You download the app, you buy the pristine notebook.
The really expensive notebook.
Right, the expensive one. And you start out with this massive, unshakable motivation. It feels like magic.
But the text is very clear here. Motivation is a terrible long-term strategy.
It really is. To survive, it says you have to set up a rigorous mechanical study routine.
Because motivation is just an emotion, right? And emotions fluctuate.
Yeah.
What the text is arguing here is that enthusiasm alone will actually betray you. When you first start out, everything is novel.
It's all fun and games.
Right, until you hit the heavy lifting, usually the first complex grammar concept. And what happens to most learners then?
They give up.
Exactly, they give up, they encounter structural friction, the dopamine drops, and they just abandon the project entirely.
It's like New Year's fitness resolutions. Lots of early energy that just fades when you actually have to lift the weights.
That's a perfect analogy. So to actively combat that emotional crash, the text tells you to break down those massive, intimidating goals into tiny daily tasks.
Right, because your brain looks at a goal like learn Mandarin and completely panics.
Oh, yeah. Overload.
It's way too big.
Yeah.
But if you break down the goal to, like, learn how to ask for the check at a restaurant, well, your brain can handle that.
It is entirely about bypassing the amygdala's overwhelm response.
Yeah.
You are lowering the cognitive barrier to entry.
But the text pairs this with strict consistency, right?
Yes. It warns that if you genuinely want to get ahead, you literally cannot put off your daily practice. Language acquisition is highly perishable.
If you don't use it, you lose it.
Precisely. If you delay, the compounding negative effect is immediate. You fall behind, and suddenly you are burning twice the cognitive fuel just struggling to catch up to where you were 3 days ago.
And man, we've all been there. That cycle of falling behind and desperately trying to catch up creates so much anxiety.
It's awful.
You start associating the target language with guilt. That's why I really love the specific verb the text uses to counteract this anxiety. It tells you to just settle down.
Settle down.
It doesn't say force yourself or conquer the material. It just says you need to settle down at your desk.
Let's take that a step further, actually. The physical act to settle down is a grounding mechanism. It removes the existential weight of the entire language.
Oh, that makes sense.
You aren't judging your overall fluency in that moment. You are simply asked to keep up with the specific schedule for that specific Tuesday.
Right.
It creates psychological safety. Chop the wood, carry the water.
It takes the pressure off entirely. But, I mean, of course, once you've managed to settle down and establish that routine, you actually have to engage with the raw material.
Which brings us to reading.
Yes. And reading in a foreign language is incredibly daunting. You are just staring at a wall of text.
It's intimidating.
The source notes that when you are analyzing articles, you need to actively go over the paragraphs slowly. And inevitably, you are going to come across an unfamiliar word.
Right, it's bound to happen.
The instinct, and honestly the advice we usually hear, is to stop, look it up, and immediately write it down.
Which is the fundamental mechanism of expanding your linguistic database. You isolate the unknown, you capture it, and you physically log it into your memory by choosing to write it down.
But hold on, because I actually have to push back on this a bit.
Oh.
How so?
Well, the text seems to contradict itself right after that. It tells you to stop and look it up, but then it also advises that sometimes you just need to read through the entire article without stopping so you can catch on to the main idea.
I see what you mean.
Like, how are you supposed to balance stopping every 5 seconds to write it down versus letting it flow so you can actually catch on? I mean, if I stop for every single word I don't know, I completely lose the plot of the story.
Well, what's fascinating here is that it's actually not a contradiction at all.
It's not. No, the source material is advocating for a highly sophisticated, dual approach to reading. It is fundamentally a question of cognitive load.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Your working memory is like a small buffer. If you stop to look it up every time you come across a new word, you wipe that buffer clean. By the time you reach the end of the sentence, you've forgotten how it started.
You lose the forest for the trees.
Precisely. So the text suggests alternating your strategies to build up your vocabulary. Sometimes you microfocus, sure, but other times you have to macro read.
Just power through.
Exactly. You read through to train your brain to tolerate ambiguity. For instance, the text points out that when you hit a confusing idiom, you shouldn't immediately run to a dictionary.
What should you do instead?
You should first try to work it out using the surrounding context clues.
Oh, so you have to treat the text like a puzzle. You become a detective.
And that struggle is where the learning actually happens. In cognitive psychology, there's a concept called desirable difficulty.
Desirable difficulty.
Right. When you actively try to work it out yourself, the neural pathway you form is dramatically stronger than if you just passively wait for a tutor or an app to clear it up for you.
Oh, wow.
You are building cognitive muscle by sitting with the discomfort of not knowing, rather than instantly seeking the answer to clear it up.
You are earning the vocabulary, not just being handed it. I love that.
It changes everything.
It really does. But reading is still, essentially a safe, silent activity. You are alone in your room.
Nobody's watching you.
Exactly. But here's where it gets really interesting. The roadmap requires us to move from the safety of silent comprehension to the absolute, terrifying vulnerability of speaking out loud.
That's the real hurdle.
I always compare that fear of speaking to being trapped in a silent film.
A silent film? How do you mean?
Well, you have this rich, complex internal monologue, right? You've been reading, you've built up this great vocabulary.
You know the words.
You know the words. But externally, because you are absolutely terrified of making a mistake, you are just gesturing and nodding like a mime.
Yes, the frantic nodding.
Right. If you don't break that silence, you are locked inside your own head as a passive observer.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize the barrier. It is a profound neurological and psychological shift from passive reception to active production.
It's huge.
The source text urges learners to literally push air out of their lungs and try out new expressions in the wild. You cannot wait if you are, quote-unquote, ready.
Yes. It bluntly states you must step up your speaking practice. And the warning it gives is pretty stark, honestly.
It doesn't sugarcoat it.
Not at all. It says if you avoid speaking because it's uncomfortable, you will end up in this bizarre purgatory where you understand absolutely everything you hear, but you can speak absolutely nothing.
Which is an incredibly common plateau, by the way.
I've been there.
Most of us have. To avoid that, the text emphasizes a specific type of psychological resilience. It tells you to stick to your target language even when the conversation feels clunky and awkward.
Even when you sound foolish.
Exactly. It promises that if you endure that friction, your efforts will eventually turn out well. The compounding interest of those uncomfortable conversations will absolutely pay off.
But I mean, let's be real about that friction. It hurts.
It does.
Especially when you're talking to native speakers. The text mentions that natives might point out your pronunciation or grammar mistakes. And think about how that feels.
It's bruising.
You're a smart, capable adult in your native language, and suddenly you're being corrected on how to pronounce a basic verb. The ego just winces.
That is the ultimate test of your resilience right there. The ego's immediate fight or flight response is to retreat back to the safety of silent reading.
Just hide behind a book.
Right. But look at the specific, almost clinical action the text prescribes for that exact moment of embarrassment. It says, note what you should leave out next time and simply move on.
Just move on.
Yeah.
Don't spiral. Don't apologize profusely for 5 minutes.
Exactly. It reframes a mistake. It
Yeah.
is no longer a personal failure or an indictment of your intelligence. It is just a neutral data point.
It's his data point.
Noting what to leave out and choosing to quickly move on is the secret to maintaining conversational momentum. If you dwell on the error, the flow state of the conversation dies.
Yeah, it just grinds to a halt.
But if you make the micro adjustment and keep talking, you are doing the most important thing. You're communicating.
Which is the entire point of the language.
Exactly.
But speaking is spontaneous. It evaporates the second it leaves your mouth, and people are generally forgiving. They know what you mean, even if you mess up the tense.
Usually, yes.
But the source text then moves us to a completely different arena. It talks about structuring our output through writing and presenting, and writing is unforgiving.
Very much so.
There is nowhere to hide on a blank page.
Because the permanence of the written word demands structural exactness. You can't rely on a charismatic smile or a hand gesture to convey meaning.
Right, and the text provides very mechanical, almost disciplined advice here. It says, when you make an error in an essay, just cross out the mistake. Don't obsess over it.
It's just a simple correction.
Yeah, and it stresses the unglamorous discipline of making sure you fill in every single workbook exercise before you hand in an assignment.
The daily grind.
But there was one piece of advice that really stopped me in my tracks here.
No.
It says, if you get a low grade or a really heavy correction, you need to sit quietly and think it over to find out where your logic failed.
Why did that specifically stand out to you?
Well, because of the world we live in right now. If I write a clunky sentence today, I don't sit and think it over.
You use tech.
Exactly. I paste it into an AI and say, hey, fix my grammar.
Huh.
Or I just Google the conjugation. So why is the solitary, frustrating act of thinking it over so critical to the learning process, according to the text?
This raises such an important question about the depth of processing. When you outsource the correction to an AI, you fix the essay, sure, but you do absolutely nothing to fix your internal mental model.
The AI did the lifting.
The AI did all the work. When the text advises you to think it over, it is forcing metacognition. It is asking you to interrogate your own logic. When you write an essay or when you carry out a formal presentation, you are required to put together disparate pieces of vocabulary and grammar into a coherent argument.
You are building an architecture with the words.
Yeah.
You aren't just throwing bricks at a wall.
Precisely.
Mhm.
You have to lay a foundation. You have to sum up your main points logically and then smoothly wrap up your conclusion.
Right.
The text notes that your writing will only truly stand out if you can back up your opinions with structured facts.
It's all about structure.
All of these actions, putting together, summing up, backing up, they force your brain to synthesize loose, floating rules into a solid, logical framework.
Which you bypass with AI.
Exactly. If you just asked for the right answer when you hit a roadblock, you bypass the necessary cognitive struggle that actually cements the language into your long-term memory.
You have to feel the friction to lay down the neural tracks. Okay, wow. Let's look at where we are on this map.
We've covered a lot.
We really have. We've laid the groundwork by setting up a routine. We've decoded the input by balancing our reading strategies. We've broken the silence by speaking through our mistakes. And we've structured our output through the discipline of writing.
It's quite the journey.
And all of this grueling daily practice compounds. That brings us to the final summit of our text, achieving intuitive fluency.
The destination that seems so impossibly far away when we were just trying to settle down at our desks on day one.
Exactly. The text promises that with relentless consistency, your basic, clunky skills will eventually turn into advanced fluency.
It paints an incredibly aspirational picture.
It does. It's this, you'll reach a point where you can confidently bring up complex subjects at a dinner party and easily figure out dense, rapid-fire audio clips without breaking a sweat.
The dream.
But right before it hands you the trophy, it drops this really stark warning. It says it takes significant time to get through the intermediate plateau.
Ah, yes, the plateau.
So what does this all mean? What exactly is this intermediate plateau, and why is it the final boss of language learning?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of skill acquisition, the intermediate plateau is neurologically the most dangerous phase of the entire journey.
Really? Why?
Think about it. When you are a beginner, your progress is meteoric. Going from knowing 0 words to knowing 100 words is an infinite increase in your ability to communicate.
Every day feels like a victory.
Exactly. But when you already know 2,000 words, learning 50 more doesn't feel like progress at all. You're no longer a beginner, but you definitely aren't fluent.
Oh, it's like driving on a highway in completely dense fog.
How so?
Like the speedometer says you're going 60 miles an hour, but because you can't see the landmarks passing by, you feel like you aren't moving at all.
That's it, exactly.
You can order the coffee, but you can't joke with the barista.
That is the perfect analogy. You are in this frustrating, foggy purgatory where the effort to reward ratio seems totally broken.
So how do you get out?
Well, the text is profoundly reassuring here. It says that the sheer endurance required to get through this fog is where the real magic happens. If you don't quit, you will eventually pick up the natural rhythm of the language.
Wait, pick up. As in learning informally without trying.
Exactly. You transition from explicit memory, actively trying to remember a rule, to implicit memory.
It becomes automatic.
It shifts from conscious heavy lifting to subconscious pattern recognition. You stop translating the language in your head and you start inhabiting it.
And the reward for enduring that fog is everything. The text says you can look forward to the day when you no longer rely on rigid grammar rules, but rather you count on your own intuition.
Which is incredible.
That is the ultimate dream for anyone listening to this. To not have to mentally pull down a verb conjugation spreadsheet in your mind before you open your mouth, you just speak.
It's freedom.
And the text gives this beautiful everyday example of mastery. It says when you are walking down the street and you run into lost tourists, you can effortlessly pass on directions without a second thought.
Notice the shift there, though. It is no longer an academic exercise.
You aren't practicing anymore.
Right. You aren't practicing Spanish or French. You are just helping another human being. It has become an integrated life skill.
That's amazing.
And the text concludes with the wonderful moment of reflection. It says that years later, when you finally look back on this grueling expedition, you will be deeply proud of the unique strategies you came up with to survive and succeed.
Because it wasn't just about memorizing a dictionary. It was about learning how to learn. It was about confronting your own ego, your own frustration, and your own discipline.
You didn't just acquire a new communication tool. You literally built a new version of your own cognitive machinery.
I really love that. So to pull this all together for you, the listener, the roadmap we've explored today proves that language learning isn't a straight line.
Not at all.
It is built on hundreds of deliberate, dynamic steps. And that is why those phrasal verbs capture the reality of the journey so perfectly.
They show the work.
From the discipline of setting up your daily routine, to the courage it takes to step up your speaking practice when you feel foolish, to the sheer endurance required to push through the plateau until you can finally look back with pride. It is a deeply active process.
It requires motion. You cannot passively consume a language. You have to actively wrestle with it.
And we really want to encourage you to apply this roadmap to whatever you are tackling right now.
It's very universal.
It is. The beauty of this framework is that it transcends language. Whether you are learning to code in Python, teaching yourself to play the guitar, or even trying to master public speaking, the architecture of the journey is identical.
Steps are the same.
The only way to get through those inevitable, frustrating plateaus is to stick to your routine, break down the overwhelming tasks, and fundamentally embrace the awkwardness of making mistakes so you can note the data and immediately move on.
It is entirely about trusting the compounding nature of small actions over time. But as we wrap this up, there is one final piece of the text that really lingers with me.
Yep.
It mentions that true fluency is achieved when you can finally count on your intuition rather than consciously applying the rules.
Right, when you stop actively gripping the tool, you
Yeah.
just naturally use it.
Yes, but this raises a much deeper, almost philosophical question for you to mull over today. We constantly treat a foreign language, or really any new skill, as an external object we are trying to acquire.
Like a wrench or a hammer.
Exactly. It's a tool we pick up, wield, and put back down. But at what exact, invisible, unmeasurable moment does that learned language stop being an external tool you are actively using and start becoming a natural, integrated part of your own inner voice?
Wow. When does the map you've been desperately clutching in the jungle finally just become the way you see the world? That is something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you on the next one.